Observer Prime Vexthul had witnessed the collapse of 17 civilizations, 3 galactic wars, and one particularly embarrassing incident involving a species that achieved faster-than-light travel by accidentally sneezing on their quantum computers. None of these events had prepared him for the soft chime that echoed through Observatory Station Keith, 47, at precisely 14:22 Galactic Standard Time. The chime meant something impossible had happened. Observer Prime, his assistant, Nixavel, materialized beside his workstation with the graceful panic that only came from 3 centuries of bureaucratic terror. "We have a Class 7 anomaly." Vexthul's 4 eyes rotated independently, a useful trait when you needed to simultaneously monitor primitive civilizations while expressing profound disappointment in your subordinates. "Define anomaly, Nixavel. Did the Terrans discover fire again? Because I distinctly remember filing that report 600,000 rotations ago." "No, sir. They've discovered us." The statement hung in the air like a particularly offensive gas cloud. Vexthul's primary manipulator appendages froze over the holographic display showing Earth's 3rd continent, where several thousand humans were apparently engaged in their favorite pastime of arguing about invisible concepts while simultaneously building increasingly complex devices. Clarified discovered. Nixavel's bioluminescent patches flickered with what Vexthul recognized as career-ending anxiety. 27 minutes ago, monitoring drone K77435 reported an unusual interaction with Terran subjects. The subjects were looking directly at it. "Impossible. Our drones operate on 17 different dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Nothing with their level of sensory development could—" "Sir." Nixavel manipulated the display, zooming in on a cluster of humans gathered around what appeared to be a collection of salvaged electronics and crystalline components. They built something. Vexthul studied the arrangement. It looked like what humans called organized chaos, a concept that had baffled xenopsychologists for millennia. Cables connected devices that had no business being connected. Screens displayed wavelength patterns that shouldn't be visible to species limited to the narrow electromagnetic spectrum. And in the center of it all, a contraption that hurt to look at directly, because it was apparently functioning on principles that violated basic physics. "What does it do?" "We believe," Nixavel said, with the tone of someone announcing their own execution, "it decodes our observation frequencies." Observer Prime Vexthul had not achieved his position by panicking. He had achieved it by delegating panic to his subordinates while maintaining an exterior of professional calm. This had worked admirably for 43 years of service, through crises involving rogue AI collectives, dimensional parasites, and that unfortunate incident with the species that had evolved collective consciousness but used it primarily to compose increasingly elaborate insults. This was different. "Show me the interaction logs." The holographic display expanded, revealing a timeline that made Vexthul's digestive system perform what humans might recognize as a very uncomfortable knot. 3 months ago, the humans had been behaving normally, which was to say, inexplicably. They fought wars over resources they had in abundance, cooperated on projects that benefited no one directly, and spent considerable effort creating entertainment about scenarios they hoped would never occur. Standard human behavior. Disturbing, but predictable. Then something had shifted. Small groups of humans began collecting unusual materials, components that, individually, were harmless curiosities. Combined with sufficient theoretical knowledge and a complete disregard for conventional engineering principles, they became something else entirely. "Show me the moment of discovery." The display focused on a single human, distinguished from her companions only by her apparent role as the individual everyone else looked to when their improvised technology started making sounds it shouldn't make. She stood before their impossible device, hands moving across surfaces that responded to touch, despite being made of materials that shouldn't respond to anything. Then she looked up. Not at the sky, not at the horizon, but directly at monitoring drone K77435, hovering 2 kilometers away in a dimensional fold that should render it undetectable to any species below Type 4 technological development. She smiled. "Priority communication to Central Command," Vex Thule said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized that his career, his species' carefully maintained isolation protocols, and quite possibly the fundamental order of galactic civilization were about to become very interesting problems for someone else to solve. Classification: Existential Reorganization Event. "Sir, what should I tell them?" Vex Thule watched as more humans gathered around their impossible device, their body language displaying what the xenopsychology manuals described as collaborative excitement, a state that invariably preceded humans doing something that would require updating multiple databases and possibly rewriting the laws of physics. "Tell them the Terrans have figured out how to listen to us," he said, "and judging by their expressions, they find us absolutely fascinating." The soft chime echoed through the station again. This time it was joined by 17 others, each representing a monitoring station reporting similar anomalies across Earth's surface. Vex Thule's career had just become significantly shorter and infinitely more complicated. The convergence chamber materialized its participants with the efficiency of a bureaucracy facing extinction. 6 species, 6 different approaches to breathing, and 1 shared expression of profound, cosmic regret. Ambassador Threndok of the Spiral Coalition arrived first, his crystalline carapace already shifting through the color spectrum that indicated barely controlled rage. 47,000 worlds under observation, he announced to the empty chamber, and the one species we specifically marked as "do not engage under any circumstances" decides to engage us. "Technically," interjected High Arbitrator Zulsman, materializing in a cascade of geometric patterns, "they haven't engaged us. They've simply noticed us, rather enthusiastically." The hegemony representative, war philosopher Krontesh, manifested as a localized gravitational distortion that somehow managed to convey smugness. "I warned the Council 17 cycles ago that monitoring primitives was a fool's enterprise. Let them develop naturally," I said. "What's the worst that could happen?" "You also suggested we conquer them preventively," Threndok's carapace flashed irritated amber, "which was rejected because their psychological profiles indicated they would find warfare stimulating rather than demoralizing." Trade coordinator Vinala's fungal network pulsed with what passed for laughter among her species. "Remember the Melbourne incident? 3 humans trapped in a collapsed structure for 18 days, with no food, no tools, and exposure to lethal radiation levels. Our xenobiologists calculated a 14% survival probability. They not only survived, Zulsman's patterns shifted to display archived footage. They improved the structural integrity of their prison, established a sustainable water recycling system, and were found teaching each other recreational mathematics to maintain morale." Recreational mathematics. Krontesh's gravitational field pulsed with what might have been horror. What species finds number theory entertaining during mortal peril? The final participant arrived with characteristic understatement. Lorekeeper Chenvith of the Archive Worlds appeared as a simple translucent humanoid outline, but her presence carried the weight of accumulated knowledge spanning geological ages. "The question isn't why humans behave irrationally under pressure," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself seem slightly more solid. "The question is why we continue to define their behavior as irrational when it consistently produces outcomes that exceed theoretical maximums. Because it makes no sense. Threndok's carapace flared to near-transparent with frustration. Show them a problem, they solve it with materials that shouldn't work, methods that violate established principles, and cooperation patterns that should collapse under resource competition stress. Vinala's network released spores that translated as bitter amusement. The Kepler station disaster. 97 humans, catastrophic life support failure, supplies for 12 individuals maximum. Every species predictive model showed complete social breakdown within 6 hours. Instead, Chenvith accessed archived data with a gesture. They organized into specialized teams, jury-rigged their life support using components from recreational devices, and not only survived, but improved the station's efficiency by 37%. When rescue arrived, they were experimenting with upgrades to the reactor core. Zulzman's patterns shifted to display confusion algorithms. The rescue team found them disappointed that help had arrived before they could test their improvements. War philosopher Krontesh's gravitational field contracted thoughtfully. There was another incident. The Yellowstone eruption, volcanic winter conditions, disrupted global agriculture, predicted societal collapse within 2 seasons. They planted modified crops in underground facilities. Threndok's carapace dimmed to reluctant acknowledgement. Created underground cities, developed new transportation methods. Some of them treated the whole scenario as an interesting engineering challenge. They held festivals, Chenvith added quietly. Underground festivals celebrating what they called making do with what we've got. They turned a civilization-ending disaster into community-building exercise. The chamber fell silent, except for the various sounds of species trying to process information that refused to fit into any established framework. So, Vinala's network pulsed slowly. We have a species that treats survival challenges as entertainment, finds cooperation more interesting than competition, and solves impossible problems by ignoring the fact that they're impossible. And now, Zulzmin's patterns displayed what could only be described as existential dread. They've decided that invisible surveillance drones are just another interesting puzzle to solve. Threndok's carapace cycled through several colors that had no translation, but suggested someone reconsidering fundamental life choices. What's the current status of their investigation? Chenvith accessed real-time data streams. 17 separate groups across their planet have constructed similar monitoring devices. They appear to be sharing information freely, despite belonging to different political entities that are technically in various states of conflict with each other. They're cooperating across enemy lines to figure out how we spy on them. Krontesh's gravitational field fluctuated with what might have been hysterical laughter. It gets more interesting, Chenvith continued. Early communication intercepts suggest they've designated this as a first contact scenario and have established committees to determine appropriate welcome protocols. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments when civilizations realize they've made irreversible mistakes. Welcome protocols, Threndok repeated, his carapace now cycling through colors that suggested imminent system failure. They want to welcome us. Enthusiastically from initial assessments, Chenvith confirmed. War philosopher Krontesh spoke for all of them. We're in serious trouble, aren't we? Dr. Elena Vasquez had been staring at impossible data for 3 months, which was roughly 2 months and 29 days longer than most people could contemplate the impossible before their sanity filed for emergency leave. The difference was that Elena found impossible data absolutely delightful. Rajesh, bring up the frequency analysis from the Tokyo team again, she called across the converted warehouse that served as headquarters for what was officially titled the International Committee for Anomalous Signal Investigation, and unofficially known as that place where the crazy people play with alien radios. Dr. Rajesh Patel looked up from his own collection of salvaged electronics, improvised quantum processors, and what appeared to be a microwave that had achieved sentience. Which impossible part do you want to see? The part where we're receiving signals from 17 dimensions simultaneously, or the part where the signals are clearly structured linguistic patterns discussing us? The linguistic patterns. I think we missed something beautiful in the Mandarin translations. Liu Wei, currently upside down in a tangle of cables beneath what used to be a particle accelerator before they'd convinced it to decode interdimensional communications, called out, "If you mean the part where they describe human behavior as mathematically offensive, I've got 17 more examples from the Arabic intercepts." Elena grinned. In her experience, being mathematically offensive was the highest compliment a species could receive from alien observers. It meant you were doing something they hadn't thought possible, which meant you were probably doing something right. "Team leaders, conference call in 5, she announced. Around the warehouse, 19 different nationalities stopped what they were doing, which included activities that would have made theoretical physicists weep with joy or terror, depending on their tolerance for having fundamental constants treated as suggestions. The holographic display, assembled from components that Dr. Martinez had somehow convinced to work together despite originating from completely different technological paradigms, flickered to life, showing connection nodes from São Paulo, Lagos, Mumbai, Berlin, and 15 other cities. "Status report," Elena began. "What have we learned about our watchers since yesterday?" Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Kyoto facility appeared first, her expression carrying the particular satisfaction of someone who had just solved a puzzle that should have been impossible to solve. "We've cracked their debate formats. They're having arguments about us. Very heated arguments, actually. Something about whether we're dangerous or just confusing." "Both, I hope," laughed Dr. James Morrison from the Edinburgh team. "We've isolated 6 distinct linguistic patterns, different species, different communication methods, but they're all using the same emergency protocols. We've apparently triggered something they call a convergence event." Dr. Sarah Chen from the Vancouver group materialized in the display with data charts floating around her like excited fireflies. "The temporal patterns are fascinating. They've been watching us for what appears to be several thousand years, but the communication frequency spiked dramatically 3 months ago, right around the time we started noticing them. They're not very good at being subtle," observed Dr. Ahmed Hassan from the Cairo facility. "For species with technology that operates across multiple dimensions, they seem remarkably surprised that we figured out how to detect it." Elena nodded, making notes on a tablet that was running analysis software she'd written in programming languages that didn't technically exist yet. "What's our current capability for two-way communication?" "Functional," reported Dr. Lisa Schmidt from Munich. "We can transmit on their frequencies, but we haven't attempted contact yet. Wanted full team consensus first." "And we have it," Elena announced. "All teams reported ready status this morning. The question is, what do we say to species who've been secretly watching us and are apparently having nervous breakdowns about our existence?" Dr. Olumide Adebayo from Lagos laughed, the sound carrying clearly across quantum-encrypted communication channels. "How about, 'Hello, we've been expecting you'?" "Too dramatic," suggested Dr. Morrison. "Maybe something simpler." "Nice weather for spying, isn't it?" "I vote for technical approach, Doctor," Chen interjected. "We could offer to help them fix the obvious inefficiencies in their observation protocols. Their dimensional folding technique is elegant but wasteful." Elena felt that familiar tingle of anticipation that came with stepping into completely uncharted territory. "Actually, I have a better idea. According to the intercepts, they're currently in emergency session debating what to do about us. What if we just joined the conversation?" The silence that followed was the kind that preceded either brilliant breakthroughs or catastrophic failures. In Elena's experience, the two were often indistinguishable until afterward. "You want us to crash their emergency meeting?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her voice carrying what sounded like delighted approval. Think about it, Elena continued. They're discussing us without us. That's just rude. Besides, from what we've overheard, they've got some fundamental misconceptions about human psychology. We could clear those up. Dr. Patel looked up from his instruments, which were now displaying readings that suggested local space-time was developing what could only be described as a sense of humor. The transmission array is ready. We can piggyback on their own communication frequencies. They'll have to acknowledge us. Ethical considerations? Elena asked, because someone had to. They've been watching us without permission for millennia, Dr. Hassan pointed out. I think we're clear on moral high ground here. Elena stood, looking around at the organized chaos of human ingenuity that had somehow transformed a warehouse into an interdimensional communication hub using technology that shouldn't work, principles that violated established physics, and an approach to problem-solving that could charitably be described as creative. All right, everyone, let's introduce ourselves to the neighbors. She activated the transmission array, feeling the satisfying hum of technology doing things that should be impossible. Around the world, similar arrays powered up, creating a network that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and operated on mathematical principles that would probably give alien physicists headaches for centuries. Open channel to the convergence event in progress, she announced. The response was immediate. 6 different languages, all expressing variations of the same basic concept. Surprised terror. Elena smiled. First contact was going exactly as well as she'd hoped. The convergence chamber experienced what could only be described as an existential hiccup when a new voice joined their emergency session. A voice that spoke perfect Kethemori with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Hello there? Hope you don't mind us dropping in, but we couldn't help overhearing your discussion about us. Thought we should probably introduce ourselves properly. Ambassador Threndok's carapace shifted through colors that didn't exist in any known spectrum, finally settling on a shade that roughly translated to computational overflow error. How? He began. Oh, the interdimensional communication thing? Honestly, once we figured out you were using folded spacetime as a transmission medium, the rest was just engineering. Pretty elegant setup you've got, though we noticed a few spots where you could improve efficiency by about 40%. Want us to show you? War philosopher Kront Esch's gravitational field destabilized briefly. You want to help us spy on you more effectively? Well, when you put it that way, it sounds a bit creepy. The human voice, apparently belonging to someone called Elena, replied cheerfully. But we prefer to think of it as optimizing your research methodology. Speaking of which, your psychological assessments could use some updating. Lorekeeper Chenvith, whose vast archives contained precisely 0 protocols for this situation, managed to find her voice first. You've been listening to us? For about 6 weeks now. Great debates, by the way. We particularly enjoyed the discussion about whether we're dangerous or just confusing. The answer, incidentally, is yes. High Arbitrator Zulzman's geometric patterns collapsed into what might charitably be called a mandala of confusion. This is highly irregular. First contact protocols require… Protocols are lovely, interrupted another human voice, male this time, with what sounded like a different accent. But we're not really first contact, are we? You've been in contact with us for millennia. We're just making the conversation bilateral now. Trade coordinator Vinala's fungal network pulsed rapidly, releasing spores that translated approximately to hysterical giggling. They're treating this like a business meeting. It is a business meeting, sort of, Elena's voice returned. We've got some proposals. First, we'd like to formally apply for membership in whatever galactic community you represent. Second, we've identified several technological inefficiencies in your monitoring systems that we could help resolve. Third, we're curious about your trade networks. We've got some innovations you might find interesting. Threndok managed to cycle his carapace back to something resembling normal coloration. You want to join galactic civilization? Just like that? Why wouldn't we? You've clearly got faster-than-light communication figured out. Your energy management systems are impressive, and frankly, we're getting bored with just talking to ourselves. Plus, we've been analyzing your economic models from the data streams, and we think we've spotted some optimization opportunities. Optimization opportunities, Krontesh repeated, his gravitational field betraying what might have been the early stages of breakdown. In our economic models. Nothing major, assured a third human voice, this one female with yet another distinct accent. Just some market inefficiencies that are costing you approximately 37% of potential resource utilization across your trade networks. We've drafted some preliminary solutions. Chenvith accessed her archives frantically, searching for any species that had responded to first contact by offering to improve their contactors' economic systems. The search returned 0 results. You've been aware of our existence for 6 weeks, she said slowly, and you've already analyzed our economic models? Well, we had to do something while we were learning your languages, Elena replied. Your data compression algorithms are beautifully elegant, by the way. We might have some suggestions there, too. The chamber fell silent, except for the various sounds of 6 different species contemplating the possibility that their carefully ordered universe had just been reorganized by enthusiastic newcomers armed with spreadsheets. What? Threndok asked, with the careful tone of someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Exactly do you want from us? Want from you? Elena sounded genuinely surprised. Nothing, really. We just want to help. You've got this amazing galactic civilization, but from what we can observe, you're running into some pretty standard scaling problems. Growing pains, basically. We've got experience with that sort of thing. Experience? Zulsmin's patterns flickered weakly. With galactic civilization. Scaling problems. Not galactic, obviously, admitted the male voice, apparently called Rajesh. But the mathematical principles are similar regardless of scale. Resource distribution, communication lag, organizational inefficiencies, coordination challenges across diverse populations. We've been working on these problems for centuries. And you think you can solve our problems better than we can? Krontesh's gravitational field pulsed with what might have been indignation. Not better, Elena corrected gently. Differently. Fresh perspective, you know? Sometimes when you've been doing things one way for a long time, you miss obvious alternatives. Vinala's network released spores that conveyed profound bewilderment. They're not trying to conquer us, they're trying to consultant us. Is that even a word? Asked Threndok. It is now, Elena replied cheerfully. So shall we schedule a proper meeting? We've got about 17 different working groups ready to present their initial analyses of your infrastructure systems. Oh, and we brought coffee. We noticed from your biological scans that several of your species should be able to metabolize it safely, and it really helps with long planning sessions. Chenvith, drawing on eons of accumulated wisdom, finally understood the true scope of what was happening. You're going to help us whether we want help or not, aren't you? That's a bit dramatic, Elena laughed. We're going to offer to help. What you do with the offers is entirely up to you, though we should probably mention that we've identified some potential solutions to what your technical databases list as unsolvable engineering challenges. Might be worth a conversation. The silence stretched until Threndok spoke for all of them. I think we're going to need a bigger conference room. And in that moment, Observer Prime Vexthul, still monitoring from his station and listening to the exchange, realized something that would reshape galactic civilization. Every species had a breaking point with humans. The Kethamori Collective had just discovered that theirs wasn't invasion, conquest, or chaos. Their breaking point was enthusiastic assistance from problem solvers who treated the entire universe as an interesting engineering challenge, and who genuinely could not understand why anyone would object to unsolicited optimization. The universe, Vexthal reflected, was about to become a much more efficient place. Whether it wanted to or not,